Welcome to Avritt's Academy, the broadcast dedicated to Christian educators, both at home and in the classroom. My name is Katherine Avritt. This is episode 4 of the 5-part series, All Failures Are Communication Failures. Thank you for joining us today for Avritt's Academy. We have looked at the previous lessons on all failures are communication failures. Whenever we have a situation that didn't go the way we wanted and we look at what happened or where did it go wrong, we can always trace it back that it went wrong in the communication phases. So some things that we've learned to communicate, number 1, and most importantly, is to communicate with God. Number 2, communicate with your administrator, supervisor, principal, whatever that role may be. And I know that there's several different names for it. Number 3, last episode, we looked at communicating with your fellow teachers. Today, in episode 4, we're going to discuss communication with parents. Now, this is one role of communication that is very important. I think I've said that for every week, but it is true. This is why communication is so important, and we need to have it in these 5 areas. Now, honestly with you, communicating with parents is something that up until recently I have just been so scared about. Now, imagine this, my first year teaching, I was 22. I was just like 4 to 6 years older than my students. And so it was very intimidating to communicate with parents. And it took me a while to get over that fear. And sometimes now I still have that fear, but it's very important. And as a teacher, if you can have good communication with parents, everything goes so much smoother. Of course, everything's about relationships. So fostering a relationship of trust with the parents is going to put you in helping that student achieve whatever they need to achieve. It's going to be so much better. So just like with teachers last week, whenever I have communication with parents, now these are just things I told you I struggled with, and I learned from mistakes in my life of teaching in the classroom and what this didn't work. I even went so far as one of my first few years of teaching, I had a parent at closing ceremonies yell at me and tell me I was a problem to everyone in the school. When I went home and I sat in my closet and cried. I don't know why I sat in my closet, but that's just where I was and felt safe. And I cried because I had lack of communication with the parent. The parent felt I let them down or let their student down in some way, and they let me know. And so I have learned this through the reproofs of life, the importance of communicating with parents. Now, when we communicate with parents, as last week I told you, a written and verbal communication. You cannot, I don't think, over communicate with parents. Now, some parents, they just want to get out of their car, they want to walk in your classroom, and they want to talk to you face to face. Some parents are going to text you every single day about X, Y, or Z. Some parents are texters, some are emailers, some are, here's a hard copy of the paper. So you need to figure out, every parent is different, the best way to communicate with them. Because I had a family who the students were in very poor academic shape, and we just kept sending them email reports of what their students were lacking in. And at parent-teacher conference, the dad said, I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't get any of them. So what worked for that parent was we would print out a progress report for the student, and at the bottom we'd have a signature line, and the student would have to bring it back to us. So for that parent, it worked to have written communication. So whenever I send a letter home about something, I always try to send it home as written communication, verbal communication. Now I do printed hard copy and I do digital. And something that's a great idea is if I'm sending out a mass email to the school parents about an event or a field trip or anything, I also send a text. There is an email coming about your student's assignment. You will find it this tomorrow or whatever, just so the parents know where to look. And then another thing, as I said last week, and I can't stress this enough, when you are giving written communication, you always want to make sure that it cannot be misinterpreted in the wrong attitude or spirit, especially if you're communicating verbally or written communication about a student's situation that's a negative, that's a behavior correction. You need to make sure that you just give the details that are needed and that nothing can be read into it, that would be bad. So let's talk about some ways or things that we communicate about with parents. Now, one thing we always, since our job is teaching, probably one of the most important things you communicate with your parents is academics. Now, this is something I started years ago in the beginning of the year before school starts. It's always best to give the parents, these are the courses I'm teaching your student. And in elementary, here are all the different things we're teaching, because it can vary. Like, this is the type of science they're going to be learning. This is the history, their world history we're going to learn from this year to this year, or whatever it is. Just an overview of what you're teaching and your grading scale. So this way they know, 20% of their assignments or 20% of their grades going to be for projects. We need to really focus on this. Their spelling tests make up 20% of their English grade. We need to make sure we're studying for spelling tests. So I always let them know an overview of what I'm teaching them and the percentages of their grades. And then something I started doing in the last few years that has been very helpful, and it takes a few hours on my part, but it really does help on the communication, is I print out a list of all the due dates for tests, quizzes, and projects for the entire quarter. And I give them to the parents as a hard copy and as a digital copy. So that way you can't say, my student just told me that there was a book report and they need to have it finished and read by tomorrow or in 3 days, and we don't even have a book. I didn't know. This way, parents will still say they didn't know, but some of them, not all of them, many of them are so great, and they read it and they get ahead of it and they know what's up. So sometimes I've had teachers who've had the attitude of, my students older, such as even in upper elementary, I don't need to communicate with parents what's due. I have a senior, I don't need to communicate with parents. Yes, you do. Young people are young people, and sometimes they have the best intention of telling their parents, hey, I need to go to the library to get my research books, but they don't do it till the night before and the library is closed or whatever. So it doesn't matter the age of the student. I know we want our young people to be responsible, but you should just always give the parents the benefit of the doubt and a heads up of, this is what you need to prepare for and this is what you need to plan. Even though some parents put it on the student's responsibility, you let me know when you need to go to the library, and if you put it off to too late, it's on you. Some parents just want to help their kids along, and it's just helpful to know, you're going to have a spelling test every week. Let's make sure we study. So I always communicate about academics, their percentages, what they're worth, and when assignments are due. Even in the older grades, I always let them know when their assignments are due, because some parents want to know, and having them on your team is going to help the student to study and to prepare. We also need to communicate about behavior in the classroom and with their classmates. And I know sometimes you might think that just elementary school students have issues on the, let's use playground or, socially, but it can happen to high school students too. You always need to make sure you communicate with parents, both good and bad. Something that I had expressed to me once is that I had a student who was just having a negative behavior, and I was telling the parent, it came to a head, and the parents felt as if I had a personal attack on their student because all I communicated was bad things about their students, which I don't think I did, but they felt that every communication I had with them was a negative. So I tried to make sure I communicated all the positives. Hey, they made it a whole week without being tardy, or, they got the high grade on their math test, or whatever it was. So if you have a student, and I know sometimes with some students, you're trying to rack your brain, what's something positive I can think, make sure you go out of your way to communicate with parents positive, so they don't feel that their student is being attacked by you, because even if it's not that way, it might seem that way if they get an email once a week or every 3 days about their behavioral issues. And once they have corrected that behavioral issue, make sure you praise them. Praise the student, of course, in person, but you praise them to the parents. I had this student, they had this issue, they corrected it. Just thank you for correcting that and doing the best. This is the best. I'm very proud of them for taking these steps. So make sure you always follow up, even if it's a disciplinary issue or a behavioral issue, you follow up with a positive. So we want to communicate with parents about academics, about behavior, positive and negative. And then we also need to communicate with parents about scheduling. Now, this may be field trips, fundraisers, programs, program practice, anything of the extra. You need to communicate with parents, and you need to communicate with parents very well. You can't give them too many details. So for example, if you're going on a field trip, How are you getting there? In a car or on a bus? Where are you stopping? Do they need money? What do they need to wear? Specifics. So the more information a parent has, the more confidence they're going to have in this trip, and they're going to know what's going on. And by the by, I am one who loves leaving the school on time and getting back on the time allotted. However, that's not always reality. So if we live about an hour and a half from the state capitol, if I'm taking my students on a state capitol field trip, we tour the capitol, we're coming back, oh, we're running behind schedule. Before I leave the capitol, I'm going to text or call every one of those parents and say, we are leaving Sacramento now. We're going to stop in Yuba City for lunch, and then we'll get back to the church. I'll be sure to let you know when we're 20 minutes out. That way they always know where you are and what time to be there. I'm sure it's very frustrating to parents. Well, they said they're supposed to be back at 4 and it's 4:15 and I'm waiting in the parking lot and I don't know what's going on. So communicate with them the plan. And then as you're driving back, make sure you're texting them. No, don't text and drive. So you can have either the student do it, voice text, or pull over and do it. But always communicate with the parents what's going on, where you are. Last year, we went on a field trip, and it just did not go to time schedule at all. We were supposed to be back at the school by 4, and we barely even left by 4. It was so long. And we're out of reception. So as soon as we got in reception, we went on a hike up in the mountains. I was sure to let every parent know what had happened, where we were going. We're okay. So just communicate with them along the way. And there is not a greater team member you can have than communication with parents. And don't be afraid to make yourself open for parents' communication. Just give them, before the school year starts, give them your cell phone number, give them your email address. Make sure you let them know that you are approachable and you are able to talk. So some parents are more needy than others, and that is fine. It is their child. They're paying for the child to have a quality education, and they just need to ask you a question. And sometimes it frustrates me. For example, if I were to send out an email to all parents, these are the assignments that the student needs to turn in. And then the parent texts me with follow-up questions. What do they need to do? Did you get my email? Yes. It's all located there. So what about for this subject? No, I didn't say anything about that. So make sure that you're available. Most of the time, parents will only contact you about pertinent things. And if they're calling you at home on off hours with your family time, most of them are not going to talk to you for 20 or 30 minutes. They're going to be a 2 or 3 minute situation. Just following up, making sure things are right, and knowing that they have that availability to contact you really does build trust, and it makes the student-parent relationship better. And if you have the parents back, the parents have your back. Ultimately, your student is going to succeed better. So that's going to wrap up this segment or this episode, All Failures Are Communication Failures, Communication with Parents. So again, in review, we're going to communicate about academics. We're going to communicate about behavior, good and bad. We're going to communicate about scheduling and extra activities. If you would like to be aware of all of my episodes coming up in our series, we're going to finish our series later this week, and then we're going to start something new. Please make sure that you subscribe to our broadcast so that you can make sure you know when they're happening, so I can give you some good tips for teaching. Thank you. Have a good week.